in our hour. We only have a precious hour. Right. So, in our brief hour, we review some of the research, try to make this research-based in terms of the recommendations I want to offer. And normally I would ask you to practice, and I would give you some student writing, and we would practice the recommendations. However, with just an hour to go, and with so many people on WebEx, we're not going to do that today, but I just want to acknowledge that. Ideally, this would be a workshop that's an hour and a half or 2 hours, and we would have time to practice. And then we definitely want to save time for the discussion or the conversation, because that's what these ATL meetings are about. So first of all, I want to say the feedback is not about grading. We're not going to talk about putting a grade on a finished product today. That's important to do. We can address it in our conversation. Of course, we have to grade the writing at some point, but first, students need to go through a full process. Time, ownership, and response are, I think, the three-legged stool of good writing pedagogy, and this is the response part. So feedback is what shapes the next version or a final product, and all of the points I want to make today are predicated on a writer's opportunity to revise. So the bottom line is, if they don't have a chance to revise, there's no point giving them a bunch of feedback, right? Or justifying your grade. If you're grading, all you need to give them is a grade. So think about that. Studies on responding show basically no comments equals no revision. If you want them to revise, you have to give them some comments. So they're not going to think about changing it on their own. They need some guidance. They need perhaps just reference to a rubric or whatever, but they need something to spur that revision. Also, studies show that too many comments equals paralysis. And we're going to talk about that. It's very well intentioned when people comment extensively on student writing, but it doesn't work to improve their writing, typically. Not again. Oh, okay. So Nancy Summers, this study's quite old by now, but it's been replicated in different ways, and it's certainly a foundational study in our field. Piles and piles and piles of student writing with constructive comments. And what they found was that revision becomes what the teacher wants instead of what the writer is thinking. So it becomes a teacher-pleasing exercise, basically. Oh, the teacher told me to change that, so I will. Instead, we want students to be thinking critically about what would improve the paper or the argument or the narration. And it shouldn't be just about do what the teacher says. And so certainly at the college level and advanced levels, we don't want them just parroting back what we told them. A second finding is that teachers tend to offer rules for composing or rubber-stamped comments. That is, things that could go on any paper, like the awk, A-W-K, for awkward, right? That's a rubber-stamped comment. It really means almost nothing to the student who gets that comment. They don't know why. And it's not actually spurring any kind of revision or change. And then rules for composing: never start a sentence with and. Right? Well, first of all, that's not true. You can start lots of sentences with and effectively. But those are things that they just repeat, that teachers tend to repeat as nobody does this or everybody should do this. And they're not useful because they're out of context. So too often we're relying on something that could be stamped onto any paper, and we really want to make it more contextual. Especially from over-commenting, students can't tell what the most important concerns are. Too often when they get a paper back, they're really not sure where to start. They're not sure the hierarchy of what they should be looking at. So we need to work harder to make kind of cut down what we're saying so that they've got 3 things to focus on, for example, because I love 3s, but it might be 5. But it needs to be really clear. And this is kind of a classic one. Teachers often take over or appropriate the text by lines and rewriting passages for them, changing the words, all of that. Now it is, again, it's well intentioned, but it's not teaching them how to make better choices when they're presenting their writing. So the final finding from the summer study is that over commentary leads to contradictory advice. So when you are being very diligent by writing lots of comments and marking lots of things on that student paper, you probably at some point are giving them contradictory messages. And then, again, they can't tell where to begin or what to focus on. So what to do is basically comes down to make sure your good intentions match up with research-based practices. And that sometimes means sitting on your hands, putting your pencil away, reading through a whole entire discourse before you start commenting, making sure you understand where it's going, and maybe the student, you think, where's the citation? But it is there, you just haven't gotten there yet, something like that. So those are things that we're going to try to emphasize, that some of your habits you might have to try to break. Here's what not to do, right? This is what I call criminal commentary. You can see the X's where it's just, taking out whole paragraphs, lots and lots of comments. But if you were the writer and got this back, what would you think? I mean, you'd probably be pretty disheartened. But it's just too hard to decode. What does the yellow mean? What does the orange mean? Right? Avoid is one of those things that rubber stamp. What does it mean to avoid? Right? Here's another version from the same instructor. But you see all those marks, and it's like easy, right? So you don't want to do this. This is the no-no, do. So on this is what happens when you overload with comments and markings, is that in the same paragraph or page, a student might see, you need to add more research to back this up, and edit this sentence for clarity. And what do you think causes this? And fix the spelling. Well, if you were the student, which one are you going to do? Fix the spelling, right? Because that's the easiest one to do. This one is the one that is probably the best example of what we're going for when we're going for meaningful feedback. Asking a question, asking them to go a little bit deeper, right? But this, even in the best of instructors, sometimes we cross the line and give them too much. And that's why I use track changes in Microsoft Word, which I'll show you, because if I make a comment, I can always go back and delete it. The student never sees it was there, right? Because I've decided, whoa, this is more important than that. So goals for our feedback are to intervene in the writing process to motivate revision. That's the number one thing. We want to intervene productively, respectfully, but also we want to push them to go again, to try again with the same idea. We also want to respond as an engaged reader. And I distinctly mean reader, not teacher, right? When students are asked to do peer review, they often say, well, what do I know? And I say, you're a reader. You can read. Can't you? You know when you're bored, you know when you're confused, you know when you're lost, you know when you're engaged, you know when you're delighted. You can reflect that back to the writer. I'm confused here, I'm delighted here, or I'm satisfied here. So focusing on being a reader rather than being a teacher might help improve your feedback. And then very important to say, what to say to this writer about this text. Because sometimes things come into the picture, they're a second language learner, or they're taking this class for the second time, or whatever, the whole picture of the student you're dealing with might change what you say to this writer about this text. So feedback should be descriptive, goal-directed, and goal-referenced. And in this case, you might have a rubric, and that's what we mean by referencing the goal, which is to produce this kind of piece, right? So referring to your own rubric is a really good strategy for giving feedback, reminding students what the important criteria are. So here's my mantra. I've changed a little bit. I can't always say paper, it could be project, but we want that to say what to say to this writer about this text. We want to embed that in here, and to direct and facilitate revision while avoiding overkill and contradictory advice. So I have a handout to give you at the end, which will have some of these things on it. And I'm gonna go in a little bit deeper to what I mean by direct and facilitative revision or comments, because there is a very distinct difference in those. Okay. So directive commentary is just like it sounds. You're kind of giving orders. There's always a verb involved, right? So expand your claim to include the evidence you share about migrants. So you just tell them, right? Just tell them. Switch paragraphs 3 and 4 and add appropriate transitions. Now you wouldn't want every single comment or piece of feedback to be that, value the directives. It gives them a place to begin. So if you're really being mindful about your commentary or your feedback, you might want to see, do I have at least one directive before I give this back to the writer? Here are a couple other examples of what we mean by directive comments. Define success as you use it in your summary of Menendez, or check the long quotation for accuracy. So expand, include, define, check, all those verbs, right? Just do it. Now, facilitative commentary is a little bit broader, and it's more about encouragement, support, and being that reader who's responding back to the writer. So this is a strong, clear opening. That's facilitative, right? You're trying to facilitate, say, this is good, right? So keep doing more of this, please, right? Number 2 is, I can't quite follow the logic here. That's not a directive. You could turn it into, fix the logic here, but the real point is that, there may be some logic, but you can't follow it. It's first person, which is good, because you are being a reader. I'm trying, I can't get there, right?
You don't want to write WTF?
Yeah, well, that's probably good advice. I did write the other day, I did put what and question mark, I remember doing it. Okay, so more facilitative commentary examples. It might help if you reread this article, or most readers would probably agree with you. Those are the kind of comments that you want to express to the writer. I'm with you, this is working, okay? So directive and facilitative. And then using questions is another really good strategy, because you're trying to put things back on the writer's plate, right? It's the writer's job to use the feedback. All you can do is give good feedback. Now they have to do something with it. So asking questions sends that message more that they need to decide. Is this the best thing for it? So, and it also helps to prevent handing down a bunch of rules for composing. So pose genuine questions about process or decisions the writer made. Anybody think of a genuine question about process or decisions? How would you phrase something like that?
Did you mean for us to see a parallel between X and Y?
Okay, did you want readers to, okay, good.
And knowing that they could say no.
Great,
And
right,
correct.
right.
The answer doesn't have to be yes.
Exactly. It just makes them think, right? And it gives them an idea, a glimpse into your mind. What are you thinking as you're reading?
So when something like, is there a more logical place within your
Where this
paragraph is?
Yeah.
Is that also?
Yeah, that's good, right? So again, just reinforcing to respond as a reader. Now, of course, we're more experienced readers, we're more educated readers, whatever, but we're still readers rather than teachers. So even language, like I try to always have one comment that starts, usually an end comment that starts with, as a reader, I expected, was surprised. That's always a good one. Predicted, thought. I mean, this predicting is based on reading theory, right? We read by chunking, and we predict based on our familiarity with the English language. We always predict what's going to come next. So when you surprise someone, it's often a bad surprise, right? So you can use some phrasing like that, or this move or gap surprised me. Wasn't expecting this. That's usually an indicator that more transitions are needed, or more better logic, or something. Where did such and such go? Here, I feel sure about your purpose. I always try to indicate with them where I'm with them, like, you're back. Like it's back. Like the thread is back. Here's where you get back on track. Here's where the organization makes more sense. So again, that's a facilitative comment to let them know that it was bumpy and now it's smoother, right? So it's very traditional in this world of feedback to include marginal comments. I think that's the best way to respond as a reader, is within the margins. And these reflect your experience as a reader, and they can often be facilitative, right? So it's just the pull is towards a lot of those, like commenting on every sentence, no, right? I mean, either if you're using pen and pencil, that's when you really might go down that road of too many comments. So you might want to think about how, maybe if you use pencil, you can erase some of them, but it's very tempting to comment on a lot of things. but we just can't do it. It's also traditional to include an end comment. And here, I think that's where really the directives might go. Is where you expect to, that's where you're trying to facilitate revision and motivate revision by saying, apply this, go back to, concentrate on paragraph whatever, revise your claim, whatever it might be. And, just remember that if there is no chance to revise, there's no point in offering directives. Yes?
One question about that. What if, the student's making the same, mistakes in each thing?
Mhm.
Is there still no point in saying, this, you need to do X, Y, Z or not do X, Y, Z? Keep in mind for next assignment?
Yeah,
or-
you can definitely do that if there's another assignment coming.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, then it would make sense to say next time,
Okay.
yeah, focus on that. Or I still see a pattern of, you still need to address this, right? That would be okay.
Is the kind of comment where you might say, partly as a means of justifying your grade, where this essay could be stronger pertains to blah, 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 blah?
Yeah, and that's, justifying your grade is very different from trying to guide and motivate revision. So there is a place for comments to accompany grades, but that's not what we're trying to focus on. I just want to share really quickly a couple of recent comments I made to student writers. And it's kind of cut off over there, but this is the entire first page of one student's essay. It's called PolitiFact Column. They were trying to take a claim someone else had made and then fact check it, basically. So I made a comment there about your purpose should be to fact check. I want to remind the writer of what she's supposed to be doing. Who said this? What did you decide to investigate? And then I highlighted another line and said, but it's not your purpose to do this. Your job is to do that. So this is the only thing I put on the first page, right? I mean, there's a lot of opportunity here that I could have commented on sentences, right? But that's, if she doesn't have the purpose, a strong handle on the purpose, which is to fact check a claim, there's no point, right? So the hierarchy of concerns, this stuff, the sentence level stuff, is lower, right? And we're going to get to that, right? As we move towards the end of the semester, their sentences are going to matter more. We're starting to work more on sentence level stuff, okay? And then this one had, I'm sorry that we can't see all those comments.
Can you make it smaller?
Anyway, I have a lot more. This is another first page, right? But I have a lot more to say on this one because we had already discussed this one in class. We projected it onto the screen, and the students were saying what they might suggest the writer do. So I did hit some things like society, like, are you sure this is what you want? Because we talked about this in class. So I am working more at the phrase level here because the student's taken on a tough topic and she's struggling with it. And, for example, that title, we've talked about titles, so I'm like, this title could be for anything, right? It doesn't really seem to reflect your purpose. So it really depends. I don't have a rule like only 2 comments per first page, no, but it depends on the writer, where the writer is. And I knew that for this draft, she'd already had an extra shot at it through our class work. So I wanted to really flag some word choices, humans and society, for example.
Do you remember what do you know what your comments are?
Let's see if I can see them. See, I can't see them on my screen either.
It's an
What if you're
image.
seeing the same consistent error through lots of, do you highlight that?
There would be, if you use a different color or a different, like, let's say are you using pens and pen?
I usually use pencil so I can go
Okay,
erase
all right,
and
good.
go like that.
So then maybe use a yellow highlighter or something that's a different color and show them it's a different category of comments or markings, right? So yes, you want to point that out to them. I mean, research shows that student writing in terms of errors, grammar, mechanics, punctuation, it improves by something like 40%, it lessens them by like 40%, if they know it counts, right? If they know you care, if it's on the rubric, if you've said that the language matters, right? They do tend to, but it's very responsible for you to say, this is a pattern, right? I'm just gonna yellow highlight the pattern. But you don't have to also fix it, right? The yellow highlight, and then they say, what's this about? And you try to explain it, refer them to a handbook, something like that.
Get a lot of like tenses. I just read a paper where 5 of the students had no idea what the past, present, and future tense should be for when they're using it. And they're just all over the place with it. And I've highlighted it several times with several students, and I said, this is a pattern, you need to fix this, and they
Right.
have it. Like, it just keeps
Is
coming
English
back
their
to it.
first language?
Yes. Yeah, unfortunately it is.
Oh, that's surprising to me.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So, and then I'm not sure how much it should be to me to say, okay, here's what a present tense is, and you know, I mean,
Right,
how much do
right.
I remediate that,
Right.
as opposed to sending them off.
What class are you?
So this is in biology.
About, oh, yeah.
You can refer them to the OWL, which is online writing
Yeah.
app.
Yeah.
It'll have a bunch of examples and explanations about tense and show them sentences, and I tend to do that to link for them so they can go and figure it out themselves.
Right. A
Do
link
they?
to an online
Yeah,
resource.
that's what I don't know how
Yeah.
much they actually do, because I do provide a lot of resources.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, my experience, if it's not a writing class.
Even the citing resources I give them, hand them, this is how you cite APA, and they still don't use it. So I don't know how much more I can do aside from giving them.
Well, is it in your rubric or your
Yeah,
scoring
no,
guide?
it is, and
Okay,
so,
so
I mean,
then, you
they're
know, it's their
losing points on it,
responsibility
but-
at some point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can, I said it at the beginning, that time, ownership, and response are that's the three-legged stool for effective writing pedagogy. We can only give students so much time. The rest of it is up to them, right? They have to manage their time in order to produce good writing. And so we can give them 3 weeks for a project, but if they don't manage the time, the 3 weeks, you know.
Yeah.
So we can also give them some latitude within a topic, so they can maybe do something to their strengths or do a topic they're really interested in. That's giving them ownership. But if they're not going to take advantage of your instruction
Yeah.
and the resources and the scaffolding that you provide,
Could you incentivize, like,
incentivizing.
incentivize in between revisions? So, say before this final revision is due, if you do the tense, do the APA, then you get an extra 3 points, 5, whatever. And so there's like a in-between step, because that's the stuff that they're probably gonna just skip right over.
Yeah, I mean, I might be able to do that. That'd be, it's,
Isn't that giving it like?
Him more work, yes.
Yeah.
But it's
Right,
also saying like,
right.
you get an extra piece of candy if you do what you're supposed to do. I mean,
Okay, so, yeah, let's, I do want to make the distinction between feedback and grading. And of course, there comes a time when you need to grade what they've written, of course. So, I just want to, for the workload and also based on research, you do not need to provide commentary or feedback when you're grading. All you really need to give them is a grade. And maybe you'll give them the rubric back with some circle passages that relate to the quality of their work or the standard that they've met, right? But I think a lot of people where they get burned out on teaching writing because they're giving something a B plus and then writing and writing and writing and writing about why it wasn't an A, right? But that's just justifying the grade. That's too much work and they're not going to revise it. Put your energies into drafts, right? That's where your energies should go. When I grade my final portfolios for my classes, that's all they're getting is a grade. I'm not going to write lengthy comments because they're done. It's final, it's over, right? So I do think people get caught up in defending the grade, and your energy and time would much be better spent on actually instructing them along the way before it's time to grade. So that's my pitch on that, is just, flip things around. If you're spending a lot of time grading with comments. Okay, so a little bit of myth busting here, especially for those of you who are in different disciplines. You don't have to grade everything you ask students to write. You don't have to grade it. You can ask them to write it. You can give it a quick read. You can take a random sample and read them. You can have them read each other's and give a quick feedback. You can do a lot of things without having to think that I personally must comment on everything my students write. If you have a class of 150 students, there's no way you can do that, right? So one of the foundational beliefs of writing across curriculum is that You don't have to grade it just because you assign it. It's the act of writing that helps people become better writers, right? So giving them the practice without the threat of a grade is also useful, right? And if they think no one's ever going to read this, so who cares? Well, collect them. You know, put them on the shelf. Or have them turn them in on Sakai. And maybe read 5 of them to see where the class is. Or, you know, read a dozen of them to did they get this concept? Are they getting, is this material getting through? So you get information about where they are, but you don't have to actually give feedback and turn them back.
But they still expect it.
Well, they might, but
Do you like tell them anything? Do you explain like the process, that some of the stuff I'm not collecting, but it's an opportunity for you to practice?
I think it's a good rule of thumb to tell students why you're asking them to do anything that you're asking them to do, right? So if you say, I'm not going to grade this, but I am going to look at them randomly because I want to see if chapter 7 is clear to everyone, right? That gives a little rationale, and that's why they're writing it. Yeah, John.
Could you give them a grade for just handing it in?
Oh, sure.
And just say,
Absolutely.
I'm gonna randomly select them, and if I
Right.
catch you
Right.
doing whatever.
Right, you're right.
You're gonna
If
get a
you're
good
writing
grade on it.
nonsense, you don't
Yeah.
get any credit. Okay.
Part of your participation grade, that is,
Yeah.
you did it, you
Yeah.
handed it in,
Yeah.
instead of part of your writing grade.
Yeah, so the second myth buster is that teachers don't have to read everything you ask them to write, same related, you know, just because you ask them to write it doesn't mean you personally have to read it. That's where peer review can come in, peer response, which is probably the subject for another workshop. But we really need to, you know, give students some responsibility, not only for their own work, but for the work of their peers and colleagues as well. And then one more pitch for myth busting, you don't have to have students write a long paper, right? Short 5-minute stuff is still useful. There's something called a 1-minute paper. There's something called a 5-minute paper. If a student can't sustain an argument for 4.5 pages, he or she certainly can't sustain an argument for 20 pages. So there is no earthly reason to assign a 15 to 20 page paper unless these are like maybe seniors or grad students. It was, you know, having a series of shorter papers is probably a better decision. I see some people nodding. Yeah? Does that make sense? So, yeah, some people are very loath to give up the long research paper that comes at the end. But I'm an advocate for lots of shorter assignments all along the way. Low stakes, right? Then you can turn to something high stakes near the end, right? Maybe it's revision of 3 or 4 of those short papers. Okay, so recently there's a study of over 2,000 writing assignments from 100 institutions, and they found that 64% of writing assignments were student to examiner. That is, the student's writing for the teacher, right? So this is a pitch to sort of change that up because that's school writing, and a lot of our students, especially if they're advanced, especially if they're juniors and seniors, they're not going to work school writing. They're not going to need school writing much longer, right? They need to be able to write for professional organizations, and be able to write on the job, in the workplace, for their career. So try to think about audiences that are not you, right? And purposes that go beyond a sort of essay format. You make it real, if you can, for your field, as real as possible. That's it. But we have time for conversation. Yes?
So, it was nice to have the